समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
When visitors, especially Western visitors, come to India, they usually have the same reaction. They look at the poverty and they're shocked. They say, my God, look at the contrasts. And yes, there are contrasts. They say, are you guys not upset to see people living on the pavement, seeing disabled people thrusting their stumps forward and asking for money at traffic lights? The small children who are forced to work only to earn a living to survive somehow. Doesn't all of this upset you? I mean, there are good answers to these questions and we give them. We say, yes, there are contrasts and perhaps the contrasts have grown in some ways over the last decade. But we say poverty is not so bad as it used to be. And we have figures to prove how many more people have been pushed above the poverty line. But this rarely convinces people because they then ask, are you middle class people so brutalized that you go about your daily lives and you're blinded to what you see on the streets? People making a living on the streets, people sleeping on the streets, people who have nowhere to go, people who huddle in the cold during the winters, who get rained out in the monsoons. And I always don't quite know what to say to them because perhaps to an extent we have been brutalized. But on the other hand, when they say things like, why don't you guys go out in the streets and complain about what's happening to street dwellers? I now have an answer to give them because for the last week or so, people in Delhi and perhaps in other cities, certainly in Delhi, have been out complaining, protesting, asking for a better deal for street dwellers, saying how terrible it is, demanding of the government that something's done. So that's the answer. We're not totally brutalized. There is, of course, one problem that the street dwellers we're concerned about are not human beings, they're dogs. Now, I want to make a few things clear before we go forward. I am not against street dogs in any way. I do not believe it is right to mistreat them or to harm them or to do that to any other animal, though I probably draw the line at street rats and bandicoots. We should treat animals with respect. We should treat them with dignity. And when you look at what the Supreme Court has decided, I agree with people who say that this is impractical, it's not going to happen, there aren't enough shelters, you can't take street dogs out and put them into shelters because these shelters don't exist. You can't necessarily trust municipal corporations to do it. All of this is fine, I agree with that. But equally, I don't think we should deny that there is a problem on There's a problem on the streets, there's a problem generally with stray dogs. Do you know how many people are bitten by a dog every day in India? It's 10,000 people a day. These are the government's own figures, they're official figures. It's possible that the real figure is higher. Do you know that we have among the highest, if not the highest, death rate from rabies? That China, which comes second, has half the number of deaths as we do. So let's not pretend that stray dogs are no problem and it's fine. They are a problem, not just the bites, the fact that packs of dogs roam around sometimes, intimidate children, scare people. Something clearly needs to be done. But what do we do? Yes, I agree that the explanations and the arguments advanced by the Supreme Court are not necessarily the best ones. And certainly the Supreme Court itself, when the larger bench sat and looked at what was happening, agreed that they needed to think the judgment all over again and need to perhaps rethink the order. Maybe by the time you watch this, they will have given a more detailed and final order. But the problem has not disappeared. The problem of street dogs continues. Now, you have two positions here. You have the position of radicals, of people who say that street dogs are fine, there's nothing wrong, they should do what they want to. I have read people who should know better saying things like rabies is a minor thing. Just wash your hands with soap and water. If you get bitten by a street dog, nothing will happen. I've heard people say that, if children get bitten by street dogs, it's the fault of the parents to leave the child unsupervised. I've heard a lot of nonsense to this regard. But yes, I've also heard sensible stuff. For instance, Shekhar Gupta, who's editor-in-chief of ThePrint, where you're watching this, tweeted about the experience of Pakistan, where they've caused the deaths of many street dogs. And he said these brutal solutions will not work. There are longer-term solutions like vaccination, sterilization, urban development that we need to look at. I have no problem with that. And if you look at most great Western cities, they don't have a street dog problem. There isn't really much of a problem, say, New York, Paris, London. There is a problem in some Asian cities. If you look at Bangkok, where for the last 20, 30 years, the debate over street dogs has raged, they've tried various methods, and while people disagree about how effective they have been, I will tell you that from my own experience, they've been quite effective. I don't really see that many street dogs in Bangkok. I don't feel as frightened as I do walking down some roads as I used to once upon a time when dogs used to come and bark. It may not be perfect, but certainly safer than Delhi. So where does that take us? Well, it takes us to a situation where we accept that something needs to be done, but something needs to be done sensibly and humanely. And it brings us back to where we started. Have we been brutalized? I think the visitors and the foreigners are probably right. Probably we have been brutalized. I think the Indian middle class has got to the stage where many of its members care more about dogs than they care about human beings. Of course, we should protest about street dogs being treated badly. But what about people who live on the streets? How come we seem immune to their suffering? How come we say nothing? How come whenever people are involved, many of the dog lovers and the people who are agitating now have done nothing? Ask some of these people who are complaining about dogs and how it affects our essential humanity to find Manipur on a map. They wouldn't find it. Forget about the lakhs who've lost their homes. Forget about the thousands who've been killed in that violence. If they talk about the shelters offered by the municipal corporation as being inadequate, ask them about the way in which migrants are picked up and kept in subhuman conditions. That's fine. There's never an uproar about that. Ask them about people whose homes have been demolished for no good reason and who are made homeless. They won't complain about that. Ask them people who've been lynched on suspicion of carrying beef. You wouldn't hear that much about that. Ask them about their silence when Kashmiri Pandits were driven out through ethnic cleansing, had no homes, had to come here, live in refugee camps. Some of them still do. Again, not that much said. So what is it about our middle class that when dogs can evoke such a response, not an unjustified response, but when they can evoke this response and human beings can't? Have you really got to the stage where we are so inward looking as a middle class and so self-obsessed that we only really care when the dogs and sort of little cuddly things are involved? We don't care about human beings? I don't know. And I am no one to pass judgment on the middle class. I am a member of the middle classes myself. I am as guilty of the kind of neglect that I'm calling out now. I probably haven't done enough to help human beings who are in distress. But the contradiction does strike me. Of course we should speak up for dogs, but shouldn't we speak up for human beings? Isn't there something wrong with us that we get so agitated about dogs, but as for human beings, we don't even notice?